Commentaries look at the two 7-day holidays of Sukkot and Pesach as two bookends of a collective celebration of the Exodus experience and the formation of the Jewish people. There are so many parallels. Here's one interesting parallel based on a pasuk in Mishlei, in Proverbs. Shlomo HaMelech said, "Shalosha hema nifleu mimeni, ve'arba'a lo yedatim." Shlomo says that there are three kinds of creatures that are so wondrous to me, but the fourth one I completely don't understand. Now, the context of that pasuk talks about different species of creatures that Shlomo interacted with. But interestingly enough, the Medrash tells us that Shlomo was alluding to something much deeper as far as religious practice. He said, when Shlomo said, "Shalosha hema nifleu mimeni," when he said that three things are truly wondrous to me, what he was referring to is Pesach, Matzah, Umarah. He was referring to the three primary mitzvahs of Pesach: the paschal sacrifice, the eating of the matzah, and the eating of the bitter herbs, the maror. And when he said V'arba'a lo yedatim, but when he talks about the four things that I totally don't understand, Elu dalid minim shebelulav, he was referring to the four species of the lulav. Now this is a very bizarre kind of medrash, and it's obviously communicating something very esoteric to us. Rabbi Aryeh Leib Tzunz, who was a great Rav in Europe in the early 19th century, said that when we take this medrash and put it in the context of another famous medrash, perhaps we'll be able to figure out what this medrash is talking about. We know that the three mitzvahs of Pesach, Matzah, and Maror, each represent something that is eaten. The four species of the lulav, the esrog, the hadas, and the arava, also are compared to items that either have a fragrance or have a taste, have both or have neither. And therefore we can create a parallel system. Korban Pesach, the paschal sacrifice, roasted lamb, has both a beautiful fragrance and a very delicious taste. This corresponds to the esrog that we take on Sukkot, which has both a fragrance, a beautiful citrus fragrance, and it has taste, a very tart taste, but a good taste as well. Then we look at the next mitzvah of Pesach, which is the matzah. The matzah has taste, but has no fragrance. This corresponds to the lulav, which also bears very sweet fruit, but itself has no fragrance. Okay? And then we go to the third mitzvah of Pesach, which is the maror. The maror is bitter. It has no good fragrance, it has bad taste. And that corresponds to the arava, the willow branch, which has neither taste nor smell nor fragrance. So here's the problem, is that we're missing one of the four species. What happens to the hadas? The hadas has no counterpart on Pesach, the myrtle branch, which has a good fragrance, but which has no taste. Well, think about it in this vein. The fragrance and the taste correspond, according to a medrash, to the ability to either do mitzvahs or to study Torah. And according to the medrash, something that has a good taste represents the Jew that does mitzvahs. Something that has a good fragrance represents the Jew that studies Torah, has an intellectual affinity to his Judaism and to God. Now, on Pesach, we're commemorating our physical emancipation from Egypt. And as such, it is important for us to be both spiritually and physically engaged. And that's why there is no corresponding species for the hadas. Because what is the hadas? The hadas is something that has a fragrance, but no taste. If it has a fragrance, it means that it represents the Jew who's intellectually engaged with Judaism, but is not performing mitzvahs. The Korban Pesach corresponds to the Jew who has both. He does mitzvahs, he studies Torah. The lulav corresponds to the Jew who does mitzvahs, but maybe is not so studious and does not study Torah. And the maror represents the Jew who has neither. But there really doesn't seem to be a place for someone who only studies and doesn't do mitzvahs, because after all, what is Pesach? Pesach commemorates the physical emancipation. How can a Jew feel close to his Judaism only intellectually at a time when we're supposed to celebrate our physical emancipation from Egypt. But here's the difference. On Sukkot, we are travelers in the desert. We have already been detached from that physical experience of emancipation, and we're celebrating our closeness with the Shekhinah, with God, and our being able to dwell with Him. Truly, on Sukkot, there is room for the Jew who is intellectually engaged, but is not physically engaged with his Judaism. And that's the reason why we have a Hadass, that fourth species, on Sukkot and not on Pesach. And when you think about it, when you look at the four sons that are at the Seder, the reason why we call the son who is contemptuous of what we're doing at the Seder, we call him a Rasha. Why is he a Rasha? Because we say to him, how can you possibly be such a smart young man and know so much Torah and still not wish to participate in the Seder with us? Where he says, Ma havodah azos lachem. Because when we're commemorating the physical emancipation of our people, how can you not in turn show some physical participation in the practice of our Seder? And that's why we're so contemptuous of him. But notice that on Sukkot, where there is a representation for that Ben Rasha, the person who only wishes to be intellectually engaged, but not to be physically engaged in Judaism, we do not call the Hadass the Ben Rasha. There is a place for him not to be the subject of being reviled and being despised and being rejected, but instead we say we will bind you together with the rest of the Jewish people. So that perhaps gives us some insight as to the difference between the nature of the celebration of Pesach and Sukkot. Sukkot is a time not only to celebrate the physical richness of our Judaism, but also the spiritual and intellectual richness of the Torah as well, which is perhaps why Sukkot culminates in Simchas Torah, a celebration of the intellectual gifts of what Judaism is all about. While optimally, everyone should be that Esrog, everyone should be that Korban Pesach, we also have to recognize that at different times and at different stages of our existence, there are going to be Jews of all different stripes. And Sukkot is the time to bind all of us together and make us one people. I wish you all a Chag Sameach.